In this video, I'd like to show you the text tool. Now, the text tool is largely self-explanatory, but there are a few features that are worth noting. And so let's just go ahead and run through the tool. But overall, you're going to find it is pretty straightforward. So there's a couple places you can get to it. It is up here on the quick access toolbar. You can get there from the annotate tab right here, or you can just use the keyboard shortcut of TX. Now, when you run the text tool, there are some options available on the ribbon. And you'll notice right here that we can either create text without a leader, or we could create it with a 1 or 2 segment leader or a curved leader. Now I'm going to show you some of the leader options a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to create a piece of text and I'll just sort of click somewhere on the screen and start typing in the note that I want to place. Now, this is the first thing I want you to get used to when working with text in Revit. There's a tendency to want to press enter here in order to complete the note. You'll see that that just simply puts you to the next line and keeps you within the note. Sometimes folks want to press enter there, but when you do that, it's going to say, are you sure? Do you want to keep your changes? Now you can answer yes and continue, or you could answer no and throw the note away. So I'll answer yes. But the right way to get out of a note, or the easiest way to get out of a note, is to actually click next to it. So if I just click an empty white space next to the note, that will complete the typing and it won't display any messages. And so it's not wrong to do it the other way. It's just a little bit more efficient to get in the habit of clicking next to it. So I wanted to point that out to you. Okay, so now I'm going to just zoom in on this note here that I just created. And I want to point out to you those two little icons at the top. This one right here on the left is a drag cursor, and you can use that to move the note around. So that can be the easiest way to relocate a note. If you get nearby another piece of text, then it will sense where that text is and they will try to line up with one another. So be on the lookout for that. Now, the second little icon here allows you to rotate the note. So if you need it to be at some angle other than horizontal, you can do that. If you rotate past 90 degrees, by default, it will flip it so that it remains readable. That is controlled by this little checkbox over here on the properties palette. If you uncheck this, it will allow you to have an upside down note. So in the case where you need the note to be upside down, just remember to uncheck keep readable. Otherwise, if that is turned on, then it will automatically reorient it for you. Now I'm going to delete this note and let's come back and reconsider this one. So let's say that I have this one right here. And what I want to do is I want to start pointing that to something in the model. Okay. So with the note selected, you will see those leader options that we were talking about a little while ago. We can place leaders on the left or the right side, and we can use straight lines or curved lines to create those leaders. So I'll let you choose whichever one you want, but I'm going to do a left-oriented straight leader, and it will give me these two little grip controls. So what you do is you simply drag these to point at the item that you want to call out, and then optionally, you can adjust this second grip here to create a little shoulder for the note. And it's really just that simple to create a note with a leader line. Now, if you wish, you can create the text note and the leader line in a single step. So I'm going to deselect that, go back to my text tool, and I will go to this 2-segment leader option right here. And this will allow me to first click where I want the arrow to point to. So I'm going to point to this brick soldier course here. The next click will be where you want that shoulder point to be. Notice that it is able to line up with the existing one. So I'm going to click there. And then the final point is going to line up with the existing leader. And then you simply type in your note. Now, again, don't press enter, just click away from it to complete the typing. So once I've done that, I can click the modify tool to finish out of the command. I can come back and select it, and you're still able to add leaders on either side, both the right and the left. So notice that a single note can have multiple leaders. Now we can also remove leaders using this button here, but sadly this removes the last leader. So that means if I wanted to remove the leader on the right, I have to first remove the second one on the left, then the one on the right, and then I have to come back and re-add the one on the left. So it's a minor inconvenience, but something you should be aware of. So I can take this grip now and I can point that down to something else. And so it's easy to have a single note point to multiple elements. Now let me create another one, but here right on top of the brick wall. So I'm going to deselect everything, go back to text. This time I'm going to just do, well, let's stick with the leader actually. I'm going to go ahead and point the leader right here and then maybe here and like so. Type in my note, click away from it, cancel with the modify. I want to come back and select. Notice it's a little tricky. You might need to use your tab key. And it might take a few tries of tabbing to get there, but I'm going to select the note, add another leader line on the right, point to somewhere here, add my elbow, like so. And what I wanted you to notice here is that by default, text has a masking option. So there is an opaque background on this piece of text. Now that is controlled inside the text type. So like other elements in Revit, you can select the object and on the properties palette is an edit type button. And when I click that, you can see that among several other settings is the background setting here. And the choices are opaque and transparent. So if you set it to transparent, now the brick shows right through. I think it actually reads a little nicer in this case, leaving it opaque, but I wanted you to see the two choices there. Now, there are other options here as well. You could make the text bold, you could make it italic, okay? But just be careful because if I make that change here in this dialog, remember that that is a type-based modification and that applies to all instances of that type throughout your entire project, not just this view, but everywhere. So that might be something that you want to think about a little more carefully and possibly duplicate and create a dedicated bold type or a dedicated italic type instead. So in this case, I'm simply going to turn those off and click OK. However, there is one change I want to make to the type that I do want to be global and I don't want to duplicate the type for, and that is the arrowheads. I'm not a fan of those open arrowheads. So what I'm going to do is change the arrowhead choice right here, and I'm going to choose a filled 20 degree. You can choose whichever one that you like, but I think that looks a lot nicer like so. Now, one last thing I want to show you. I'm going to add one more note and I'll do it with the leader and I'll just sort of point to the roof here. And I'm going to place this one a little bit randomly and then finish the note and click the modify tool to cancel. You're able to select multiple notes and on the ribbon, you will have some alignment options. So notice that we can align the elements to left or to right and center, and we can also align them in the horizontal and vertical directions. So for example, if I choose this center alignment option here, now all of those pieces of text are lined up based on their center. If I did right, they're going to move over there. And if I do left, they're going to move over there. So what you're able to do is just very quickly take a big collection of text and kind of rearrange them so that everything is lined up nicely. And then of course, they will continue to stay lined up as long as you pay attention to those alignment vectors when you're moving those around. So something for you to explore a little bit further. When you start adding text notes to your Revit project, you may have some really long notes that are written in other programs. They could be in Microsoft Word and Google Docs, or even here in Windows Notepad. And it might be standard notes or code requirements, or really any kind of text information that you have outside of Revit. I just wanted you to see that you don't have to retype all this information in Revit. You could just simply copy and paste it from whatever program you're using directly into a Revit text object. Now, this notepad file that I have open here, the only thing I want to show you is if I go to Format, this first line is actually a paragraph. And if I turn on Word Wrap, you can see that it's a longer paragraph. And then I do have a few hard carriage returns here and here. And so the reason I wanted to point that out is I want to show you the way that Revit treats that information. So I'm going to select all of this text and do Control-C to copy it to my clipboard. Then I'm going to click anywhere into Revit, and let's just give ourselves some room here above the file, and I'll go to the text tool and I'll click a start point, and then I have leader turned on. Let me escape out of there. Let's turn off the leader and I'll just do text without a leader. So we'll click a start point, and then I'm just going to do Control-V to paste that in. So you can either close the text editor here or click away from it in empty white space. And what you'll notice is that long paragraph just went on and on and on over here, all the way over to the other side. Now you can use this little grip control here and start to drag this to reduce the width. And you can see that it's having an impact on that paragraph and word wrapping it just like it did in Notepad. If you don't want to have to chase down that other end of the note and drag it manually, what you can do instead is click and drag a box first. And then when you Control V to paste it, it will respect the width that you designated by dragging. So that's just a little tip for you there to make it easier to paste these things in. So now I'm going to cancel out of there, and it doesn't matter which one of these notes you edit next because they're both the same. So now I want to show you some localized formatting. So I'm going to double click anywhere in this note, and that puts me back in the text editor. So you may recall in the previous video that I mentioned if you wanted things like bold and italic that you would have to go to the type for the text and edit type, duplicate, and create a bold and italic type. And that's true if you wanted the entire piece of text to be bold or italic. But if you just want localized formatting on a word or two, you can actually modify it right here in this text editor. So I could select some text and bold it. I could select something else and italic it. I could select something here and underline it. So you have some of that local formatting. There's also cut, copy, and paste here. I've got this number 3 at the end, and I could make that a superscript. There's also subscript. So if you're doing footnotes and things like that, you can do that. If you select a word or even an entire paragraph, there is a all caps option here. So these are just some of the formatting options that are available in this simple text editor. If I select a list like I have right here, we have a few different list formats to choose from. We can do a bullet list, we can do a numbered list, a lettered list, lowercase letter. I'm going to go back to number, and you can see I've got item 1, 2, 3, but then I have these sub items here. So I'm going to select all of that and indent, and it will automatically switch to uppercase letters. I'm going to select this sub item and do it again. And now it's lowercase letters. So you do have some control over the formatting of that list there. Now, the space that it puts between the bullet and the number and the item, that actually is controlled in the text type. So if you come over here and click edit text type, I'm not able to edit that right now because I'm in the middle of editing the text. So let me OK here. Let's close the text editor. Then we can go to edit type. And now you can see it's editable, but it's the tab size right here that I want to modify. So in the imperial file, I'm going to put in 1/4 inch. If you're working in metric, you can use about 6 or 7 millimeters. And when you click OK, it will pull those tabs over a little bit and make them a little bit less dramatic. So that's just a few of the localized formatting options that you have available to you in the text editor. Now, Revit's text editor is not as robust as a word processor by any stretch of the imagination, but there are certainly some features in there that you can easily take advantage of when creating these longer notes. So feel free to explore that a little bit further. In this video, I want to revisit the topic of working views, and I want to do this in preparation to getting our file ready for documentation. So in the videos that follow, we're going to be adding dimensions and symbols, and we're going to be documenting our project. And I want to do that in views like the one that you see here on screen. This is our main architectural floor plan. But right now, this floor plan is showing some information that I really don't want to see in those documentation views. Now, assuming that you don't want to permanently eliminate some of the items that I'm going to share with you, then what you want to do is maintain a working view as well. Now, all a working view is another view of the model that you use to get your work done. So it is like a private view that you use for the day-to-day editing of the model that you don't share with outside recipients. And that's really all we mean by a working view. Now, the template file that we started this project with contained some working views in it already. So we don't even have to create any working views in this model. They're already here. So let me point them out to you. So I'm going to scroll down, and one of those views is on the sections branch. It's called sections working section, and you can see it right here as section 1. Now we've encountered this view before,
It is this dash red section right here. And in an earlier video, we even hid that here in this main floor plan view. Now, to remind you how we did that, we simply went to the View tab, Visibility Graphics, and then on the Filters tab, we unchecked the visibility here to hide that in this main view. So that's something I wanted to remind you that we could do, but the presence of that working view, it's going to show up everywhere, but we can easily hide it should we want to do that. Now, the other working views that we have in this file are under coordination, under floor plans. There's a floor plans working branch, and here is a level 1 working floor plan. Now I'm going to double click to open that up. Type WT to tile these two next to one another. And let's kind of compare and contrast now the differences between these two views. The two most obvious differences that I see are the walls are displaying their layer geometry here in this view. And that's because we've got medium level of detail turned on here. In our main floor plan, it's still set to coarse. Now, based on the scale of our main floor plan, I think coarse is appropriate for printing and for generating PDFs, but for working, we're not printing or PDFing from this view at all, so it might be nice to actually see that internal layer structure. The other thing that we're seeing here, which also might be nice for coordination purposes while we're working, is all the site plan information. But of course, we deliberately hid that information in the main floor plan. So those two things are already configured to our liking between the working view and the main floor plan. And then, of course, the working section that we just hid in the main floor plan is still displayed here. Now, one thing that is not configured to our liking or optimally at this point is the room separation lines. So if I zoom in both of these views right here, these orange dashed lines are room separation lines. And if you watch the video on creating rooms, then you know that we use room separation lines whenever we want to create barriers between two rooms in places where we don't have walls. So this room separator is defining the boundary between the corridor and the reception space. However, there's this misconception that just because we think of that as a temporary object, that it somehow means it won't print. That is not the case. In Revit, if you see it on screen, it prints. There's only a couple exceptions to that. Room separation lines are not one of those exceptions. So if you do not want to see the room separators when you print or PDF, you need to hide them. So the easiest way to do that is going to be to select the room separation line, come up here to this little light bulb, and choose Hide Category. That will hide the room separators in this view, but of course you can see they still remain in our working plan, which is exactly what we would want. So should you need to make some modification to the shape of your rooms, you could do so in the working plan. The rooms will update accordingly, and the main floor plan doesn't need to display them. So that's an example of having a category turned off in one view and on in the other for practical reasons. Now, just so you know where that setting is that we just did, you can go to Visibility Graphics, VG, scroll down and locate the lines category, and room separation lines are a subcategory of that. So when I right-clicked and told it to hide, it was just simply unchecking this box for us. I'm going to OK out of there. So the last thing I want to talk about is what I'm going to call working dimensions. Okay, so if we kind of zoom both of these out, you'll notice that there's very few dimensions in this working view. There is one string going across the bottom here, which I use to help me place those columns. But notice we don't see those dimensions in the main floor plan. They may not be where I want the dimensions to actually document those columns, so it's not necessarily the right dimension string to see there. Now, the same is true for dimensions like these. Remember, these dimensions were just a means to apply the constraint which keeps these doors set at an offset from these walls. Well, I don't necessarily want to include those dimensions in my documentation. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to select everything in the main floor plan, go to Filter, check None, and then pick Dimensions Only and click OK. I'm going to remove all of the dimensions from this view and move them over to the working view. And then in the next video, we're going to create a new set of dimensions specifically for the purposes of documentation. But initially, I want to take these dimensions and get rid of them and pull them off of this view. So to do that, I'm going to use the Cut to Clipboard. So I'm going to choose cut to clipboard, and that deletes all those dimensions, but puts them on the clipboard. And it's warning me that this might affect some constraints, okay? Things like lock constraints, labeled dimensions, and so on. You could unconstrain things, or you could simply click OK and accept that. I'm going to click OK. In doing so, that means that if you do the reveal constraints, those constraints are still there. All I did was remove the dimensions. And then I can come over here to the working view, go to the Modify tab, Paste dropdown, choose Paste Aligned to Current View, and all those dimensions will now be moved over to this floor plan. Now, the last sort of dimension thing I want to mention is there is a dimension type in this file for the purposes of checking values and making sure that the precision is correct. It is called dimension check right here. So I'm going to select this dimension at the front and choose this one with check in the name. And what you're going to see is they change color and they now have multiple decimal places. So the purpose of this dimension is to help you check distances. Sometimes these weird little fractional values creep in, and this dimension allows you to identify that. So if you discover one of those values, then you can use this dimension to help you fix it. And again, it really makes more sense to use that check style only in the working view. So now you have some examples of when you might want to set up a working view and what kinds of information it might contain. If you're working in your own projects and you don't have these default working views already set up, then you can simply right-click an existing view and duplicate it with or without detailing and then just call it a working view. So there's nothing special about a working view other than how you name it and how you use it. In this video, we're going to look at dimensioning a floor plan. Now, we're going to use the same dimension tool that we've used elsewhere throughout the course where we were editing our model. But this time, we're going to be placing the dimensions more with a mind towards documentation rather than editing. So it's the same tool, but the strategies will vary slightly. And I'd like to share with you a few of those now. So I'm going to zoom in over here on the right-hand side of the plan. And let's get started by just placing a really simple dimension in this location. So I'm going to go to the Align Dimension tool here, or DI. It's also available on the Annotate tab. Look at your options bar and make sure your settings are set to wall faces for this first drop down and individual references for this second one. And then I want to highlight the exterior face of the top wall and the exterior face of the bottom wall here. And then I will click just inside of the grid bubbles to place that dimension. So that's the basic mechanics of placing an individual dimension string. Now, of course, I've only selected 2 witness lines. That's the minimum. You need at least 2 witness lines, of course, but you can select more. So if I pick the same start point on this exterior wall, and then this time include the grid line 3.7, come down here and include grid line 2.4, and then finally the exterior wall here, you can create a dimension that includes as many witness lines as is necessary. Now, as you move around here before placing it, you should sense a location where it wants to snap. So there's a built-in offset in the dimension type itself, which will keep them spaced nicely relative to one another. So you can just sort of click when it snaps to that location. So that's the basic mechanics of placing simple dimensions. And if you just have a few witness lines, that approach can be perfectly fine. But in the case of creating dimensions along walls that have lots of witness lines, then there is a more efficient way that we can do it. So I'm going to go back to the dimension tool. And this time I'm going to change the reference here, the pick reference, to entire walls. Now, I want to dimension this entire vertical wall here, but notice that that's a stacked wall. So what you want to do is press the Tab key one time, and that will reach into the stacked wall and select the basic wall inside of it. Then I'll click, and notice that with a single click, it finds the length of that basic wall. Now, of course, I could click somewhere and place that dimension, and this one matches this one, but what you'd probably want on this innermost string is for it to also include this door opening. So I'm going to remove this one and do it again. So I'm going to go back to dimension. It should already remember entire walls, but this time I want to click the options button, and you can include the openings. So I'm going to click OK, tab into this wall, click it, and now you can see, let it snap here. Now you can see that it will not only do the length of the wall, but it will also include the center of that opening. Okay, so let's go to a different part of the plan here, maybe this little wing down here on the south portion of the building. And now what I'm going to do is go to options, and I'm going to create those 3 strings of dimensions that I did over there manually a little bit more efficiently using this tool. First, I'm going to uncheck openings and click OK. Move near this wall, press tab to highlight the basic wall inside the stacked wall, click, and I'll pull it out here maybe to place that overall dimension. I'll go to options next and choose intersecting grids, click OK, tab into the same wall, and notice that that will include the 2 intersecting column grid lines. Then I'll go back to options, choose openings, but this time I want to include the widths of the windows rather than the centers. Now I'm going to turn off intersecting grids, click OK, tab in, and pull it down like so, and you'll see it place that string of dimension. Let me click the modify tool to cancel. Now these are a little too close to the building, so I'm going to select all 3 of these dimensions and just use my nudge, which is the arrows on the keyboard, or you can hold the shift key down to nudge with a larger increment. And I'm just going to nudge these down to a more comfortable location like so. So that's the essential process that we're going to follow to create a 3-tier nested set of dimensions across this entire floor plan on several sides. So I'm going to zoom out here, and let's repeat that again over on this wall. So we'll go to dimensions, entire walls. The options should still remember the openings. So it doesn't matter if you start with the internal string or the external. In fact, using the internal string might be a little bit nicer because you can give it enough room away from the building that way. Then I will switch to no openings, intersecting grids, highlight this wall, press tab, and get it to snap. And then go to options and turn off intersecting grids, pick the same wall, and again, get it to snap. Now this time, the dimension is overlapping the bubbles a little bit, but remember you can use this little open grip at the end of the bubbles, and you can just sort of drag it just enough to get past that dimension string and make for a cleaner presentation like so. Now here at the top of the plan, I just want to point out that when you're using entire walls, you can pick more than one wall. So let's go to dimensions, and we're going to tab in to select this wall. And that starts to place a dimension at the length of just that wall at the top of the plan. But if I come over to this wall and click it, it will add that wall to the selection. And it's not necessary to hold any modifier keys down. So it will just highlight that wall and let you click it. So just like when you're in individual references mode, you're able to select multiple references. The same is true when you're in the entire walls option. So then you just start setting your additional options here. So we tab in for the first one, we click to select the second one, and then finally we do openings with widths without intersecting grids, tab in, select the second, and click to place it. If you want to fine tune the position of any of these, you can again use your nudge option. I think it's a good way to do this. And then of course we can adjust the column grids as required. And there's nothing like adding some dimensions to a floor plan to really start making it look like a construction document. In this video, I'm going to show you the symbol tool. With the symbol tool, we can place any kind of graphics or symbols that are required by our construction documents. And we have all sorts of symbols that are used in architectural documentation. The symbol tool is best for elements that are not associated with the model in any way. In other words, non-hosted symbols. If you want a hosted symbol, then really what that is a tag. Okay, so the symbol tool is on the Annotate tab, and it's right here. And if we hover over that tool, it says that it places a 2D annotation drawing symbol in the current view. So it's two-dimensional. It's view specific, which means that it's detailing, and it will also respond to the scale. So keep all those things in mind. I'm going to zoom in here. And maybe I want to mark where the center of this door is. So I'll go to the symbol tool. The center line symbol is the default on the type selector here. So I can just simply accept that and click somewhere to place it. If you needed it rotated, you can tap the space bar in 90-degree increments. And really, that is all there is to placing a symbol. Now, if I come back and I select this symbol, it has no properties here on the properties palette. However, there are some symbols that do. So now what I want to do is show you a couple symbols that are included in this file that have some properties and just talk about those real briefly. So I'm going to zoom back out and down here to the lower right-hand corner. So this file contains a north arrow symbol and a bar scale here, and both of those are symbols. They're both 2D annotations, but they contain properties. So this one, the north arrow, has a property that allows us to rotate the direction of north, and this one, the bar scale, has a property which allows us to adjust the scale factor. So let's start with the north arrow. I'd like to put in a value for the north angle. Trouble is, I don't know what I should put in. So we can easily figure that out by going to the site plan. So I'm going to expand floor plans site plan, double click the site plan view, zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to draw a detail line right along the edge of this sidewalk here, just to kind of give me that angle. Then I'm going to select that detail line, cut it to the clipboard. I don't want it in the site plan here. I'll go back to the architectural floor plan here, and I'll just do Control V to paste that into the view. You can place it anywhere that you like, and then just click anywhere to accept that. Now we're going to use the angular dimension tool to measure the angle from this horizontal reference plane to that diagonal line. Click somewhere to place it, zoom in, and you can see that it's just a little bit shy of 59 degrees. So all I need to do now is take my north arrow, click in the north angle, put in 59, press enter, and now you can see the angle is parallel to this line, and we've got it pointing in the correct direction. So I will take that line and delete it, and that completes our north arrow. As far as the bar scale goes, well, currently, this view is set to 1/8 of an inch equals a foot in this imperial file. If you're working in metric, it's at 1 to 100. I'm going to change that temporarily to 1/4 inch equals a foot, or 1 to 50 in metric. Now, what you should see happen immediately is the size of both of these symbols should adjust and get smaller. Okay, however, notice that the bar scale did not adjust to the new scale. So you have to do that manually by selecting it and then editing this scale factor. In imperial, I'm going to put in 48 because 1/4 inch equals a foot is 1 to 48. In metric, you would put in 50, and then the bar scale should update accordingly. Okay, so that's the way that that object functions. Now, I'm going to go to the undo drop down here and undo back the last 3 commands to change view scale to get everything back to either 1/8 inch or 1 to 100. Finally, at this point, once you've kind of got these configured the way you want, you don't need to do that over and over again per view. What you can actually do is just Control C to copy those 2 elements to your clipboard, and then go to any other plan that doesn't contain those items and simply paste them. So here is the architectural furniture plan, and I could do paste aligned to current view. Now, the power plan, when we originally created it, was created with detailing. So it already has these 2 symbols because remember, these symbols are considered detailing. So you could delete them and just paste them in again, or I could just simply select this north arrow and set it to 59 degrees. Either way, I'm going to get the same result. So those are your symbols. There are potentially more in the library. I welcome you to explore and potentially add some additional symbols to some of the other views in this file.